Americans more about what the Communist Party is doing to people starting in China, but then people all over the world. For many Americans that don't know the story, I start off saying what the Communist Party is doing, and I distinguish between the Communist Party and China or the Chinese. For 20 years, I've loved going to China. We worked with companies in China, and it wasn't until Xi Jinping started to ascend that we started to have problems. After Xi Jinping, we went to working with the Communist Party to warring with the Communist Party. And I tell many Americans to get them to pay attention that what they need to know is that the Communist Party is eating America's lunch out of America's lunchbox. So pay attention. A lot of the folks that we work with now are in the military, and they like that bottom line up front. So that's the bottom line. The title of the book is Dancing with the Dragon. The company that I am the CEO of right now is Pointe Bello, and there's a tie there. Pointe is spelled with an E, so it's like a ballerina on point who can pivot as she dances. The facing right now of our dancing with the Communist Party is Bello, which is war. If we change things, we can change it to Bella, which is beauty. So as we dance with the dragon, is that an imperial dragon? Why? Because it's got 5 toes. So only the emperor could have 5-toed dragons on their ball caps or their coffee cups. Anybody else that had a 5-toed dragon had their head cut off. So the book came out on October 1st. Whose birthday is October 1st?
Yes.
The People's Republic of China, 75th anniversary. So happy birthday. So this ought to be telling somebody in the United States understands what's going on, and somebody wants to help China deal with that guy. You know, we wound up suing the Communist Party. So we went from working with the Communist Party to warring with the Communist Party. Specifically, we sued AVIC, the Aviation Industry Corporation of China. In 2023, AVIC had more revenue than any other defense contractor in the world. So if a little bitty old Texas company called Tong Energy Group can take it to AVIC, get them in litigation and collect dollars, it took a while, but if a little bitty old Texas company could do that when AVIC has access to the PRC's treasury, what can we do if we work together? One of my frustrations with the book, one of my reasons to write the book, is that there are a lot of people in Washington, D.C., especially, that think our experience came out of the commercial sector, which it did, but then they think it has no relevance. But every time that we built a bigger project in China, every time we did more work, we got to the point where we were more important to the Communist Party. And so as we grew our business, we were more important to the Communist Party. People in government, in DC especially, still discount the importance of knowing how to work with the Communist Party because of our ability to work with the Communist Party. What we need to do, if we're going to change the behavior of the Communist Party, is attenuate their capabilities. And how do we do that? This is jumping way forward to what we're doing now. We try to attenuate their access to capital, attenuate their appearance of legitimacy. Now that's very Communist Party focused. And Matt Pottinger, I don't know if y'all know who Matt Pottinger is, but he was the NSC on the National Security Council under Trump's first administration. He wrote a review of the book saying it's clear that I care about China and the Chinese people. That's a distinction that a lot of people miss. My first trip to China was in 1995. It was for natural gas processing. As soon as we had the chance to move from natural gas processing to using natural gas to generate electricity, we did. Why? Because in Texas, we made more money using natural gas to generate electricity than we did with natural gas processing. As soon as we put a combustion turbine at the western end of the Great Wall, the GE jet engine, we put it on the ground, generator behind it. We were working with the Aviation Industry Corporation in China. Once we did that though, then Xinjiang Wind Energy Company, which later started Jenevein, or Goldwind, Xinjiang Wind Energy asked us to build a gas-fired power plant on their wind farm. Why? So that the wind farm could deliver electricity to Xinjiang even when the wind wasn't blowing. So it's a really good idea from an engineering perspective. From a finance perspective, it's really hard to make it work. Issues of liability come up, if a wind turbine falls or a blade comes off and it interrupts the ability of the gas-fired power plant to operate, who pays for that? So that there are all kinds of distinctions there or complications there. In response to American bombs hitting the Chinese embassy in Belgrade, I was on a plane on the way back from Beijing when that happened, and I got home and my wife met me at the airport and she was scared. I didn't know what had happened. She wasn't able to get a hold of me. I said, "Are you okay?" She said, "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine." "Why?" "We just bombed the Chinese embassy in Belgrade." So, well, that's not good for project finance. When you build a power plant, you need project finance to build big power plants and lots of them. Acts of war and project finance repel one another. Another time I was in Beijing when U.S. warplane, U.S. EP-3 collided with a Chinese fighter. So we had meetings that morning or that week, and again, act of war repels typical project financing, which is used an awful lot in the U.S., but also around the world. After those warplanes collided in 2001, we had a bunch of meetings scheduled with AVIC, and as the foreigner, I could say, our agenda is thrown out the door a lot easier than some of my Communist Party controlled associates in Beijing at the time. And we went to lunch early, and we frankly started drinking early. Beer, I like beer. I like Pijo, they like the Mau Tai. But by the end of that lunch, we had decided, let's do something that we know that we think has a better chance of working. We know energy finance, how to finance a power plant, whether it's a wind farm or a gas power plant, it doesn't matter. We understand. AVIC, biggest defense contractor in the People's Republic of China, knows how to make airfoils, wings for airplanes, helicopter blades, propellers for engines, blades for wind turbines. So we said, let's start making blades for wind turbines. And of course, after we've been drinking beer and Mau Tai, we all thought it was a great idea. But by the end of the year, we were making blades for wind turbines. That was by the end of 2001. By 2008, we were the second biggest blade maker in the world. The biggest in China by far, and the second biggest in the world. We were going to take it public for $1.8 billion. And then Xi Jinping at Assembly, or I noticed especially that my fellow board members that were Communist Party members or controlled by the Communist Party began to be paralyzed when it came to making any decision. So if we wanted to hire a new engineer or somebody for marketing, it used to be that we could hire that person very quickly. After Xi Jinping started to ascend, the Communist Party controlled folks on the board started to freeze. We couldn't make decisions. I didn't know what to make of that initially. Just as that was starting, we had started a company in Texas, and we would go develop wind farms. And then we'd go to companies like GE or Alstom and say, we're going to need about $100 million worth of equipment for our wind farm. Are you interested in supplying the equipment? And even GE would say, $100 million order, we like the way that sounds. Yes, we'd like to bid. We'd say, well, we want you to put our blades on your turbines to put on our wind farm. And that was working very well. And it came to us and said they'd like to be part of that company. We said, you can't take advantage of the tax credits. You can't keep up with the commercial cycles in the United States. And you sure don't understand property ownership laws in the United States, all of which was true. And so what did they say? They said, we'll invest $600 million. What did I say? Okay. For $600 million, you can have 20% of the company, and we'll give you a priority return. So you get all your money back first, plus a rate of return on your money, because we knew that they would want what? At least 50% of the company. We knew that if they were going to bring $600 million, that we would have one hell of a negotiation to go through. So we started it where we needed to, because we knew what we needed to protect. We had to have jurisdiction in the United States. If there was a dispute, we wanted it to be in the United States. Our view on going to court in China is that if you go to court in China, you've already lost before you can show up. So we wanted dispute resolution in the United States. We also expected that that would keep even AVIC from acting badly. It didn't work. They diverted financing. They hired our general manager. They stole a wind farm from us. You could say, Patrick, how did you let somebody steal a wind farm from you? It's really kind of easy. You change the names on contracts. You change the names from the company that we had with Soaring Wind to Ascendant Renewable Energy, which was a company that AVIC created specifically to compete with Soaring Wind that they just committed to invest with. That's why we sued. We won. The lawyers thought we did one bang-up job. This shows that we won an alter ego. Alter ego, you can think of it as chains that come together, that if you and I are alter egos of one another, you do something great, we both benefit. I do something that loses money, you're responsible too. So with that ruling, that AVIC is a single business enterprise, we were able to make AVIC headquarters in Beijing responsible, financially liable for its subordinate units' behavior in the United States. So that's what the lawyers thought. They thought we did a good job. The Communist Party thought we did a good job too. The Communist Party says any signatory to the agreement, of which I am one, cannot use, discuss, reference, mention, or provide to third parties any of the expert reports that were subject to the litigation. This paragraph comes from a publicly filed document in bankruptcy court in California. So I'm just showing you now a paragraph from a publicly filed document that you can find tonight if you want, or you can find it on your phone right now if you want. I insisted that this be filed publicly. The Communist Party did not want it filed publicly, but it's filed publicly. Two things that are really important about it. This flatline, so our litigation flatlined AVIC's strategic acquisitions in the United States. While we flatlined strategic acquisitions in the United States, their acquisitions continue to rise in the rest of the world. So our litigation made a difference. The other thing is, way over here, we collected dollars in Dallas in April 2022. It was $24 million. It was a whole lot more than that. And should we have collected more? Sure, but that falls in the category of Patrick complaining. Along the way, Lean Swabee was the chairman of AVIC. And along the way, when we had $350 million in revenue, we were buying about $50 million a year of resin. So resin is the sticky stuff that keeps wind turbine blades from blowing apart in the wind. A group of AVIC officers formed a new company, and they essentially took that revenue contract from our company called HD Blade and made it a revenue item for them. So they were going to sell us resin. Well, it turned out that their resin was really sticky water. When we would put blades into windy conditions, they started to tatter like old flags. I wrote a letter to Chairman Lean, and it's in the appendix to the book. You can read the letter I wrote him, and you can tell me if I was crazy or not. But it's essentially, the letter says, Chairman Lean, you'll be shocked to know that there's corruption in your organization. We delivered the letter to him in his office when CCDI was in the office. The Central Commission for Discipline and Inspection, we delivered it by fax. So it comes off the fax machine when people are there. We delivered it by email, in case anybody's monitoring email in the PRC. I'm sure you'd be shocked to find out that that might be going on. We delivered it by regular mail, and we also hand delivered it. The people that hand delivered it told us later, don't ever ask us to do that again. 6 months later, Jenevein disappeared. Were we the cause of his disappearing? No. Were we a hand on the back when he was at the edge of the precipice? Maybe so. So it got to be a fight. We sued AVIC. AVIC returned the compliment. They sued me personally. First, they accused me of crimes in California. That didn't work, so they sued me for recording conversations. And the amount that they were suing me for was $300 million. Emi Jan, partner of mine since 1995. Y'all, I don't know if you recognize the white guy on the left, but that's me years ago. And those first blades are blades for a 600 kilowatt machine. Later we got up to building blades for 1.5 megawatt machines that were about a half a football field long. Now wind turbines are 5 megawatts, so almost 5 times bigger. And the blades nowadays are over a football field long, but we were one of the first in there. And Jenevein is still a dear friend. I could not have gotten luckier finding somebody to work with. One of our first projects was a pilot project. This guy is Ken Collier. He grew up outside of Merkel, Texas, which is outside of Abilene, Texas, which is still a long way from Dallas, Texas. That's a 5 million cubic feet a day natural gas processor in the background. We built it in Texas. We sent equipment to St. John, this is near Kalamai, and we sent people like Ken to the Kalamai area, and we got Ken back, and we got money back. So we were actually making money. The Kalamai oil field also was negotiating an identical deal with a Canadian company. They awarded us the contracts about the same time, and CNPC, in writing about ours, said, we got ours up and running. It had already paid for itself before the Canadians even got theirs up and running. We took a West Texas approach to it, which is, it's not the most elegant, it's not the most sophisticated, but it's the most durable. It will operate under an extreme environment. A quick story about how we got the contract. Jenevein and I, who I showed you earlier, were in Kalamai working with the Kalamai oil field. And I thought we had reached an agreement, and it was time for me. I've got 3 daughters, they're all grown and have their own children now, but I used to have to get back to help with the family. So I left and Jenevein stayed on, and by the time I got back, the deal had come off the wheels. And so I wrote a fax to Jenevein. It's a confidential and bold, big font, all capital letters. I sent him a fax saying, the Kalamai engineers have negotiated us beyond a point that we can make money. They've negotiated us past a point where we can continue to make a strategic investment in a new market for us. So that fax did a few things. It gave the Kalamai engineers face, and they could go to their superiors and say, look, we out-negotiated the Americans, who are, so, at the time, this was the late 90s, who are superior business people compared to what the Kalamai oil field was. And I told him, as soon as you can, you come home. So I also complimented him, but I told him to come home. And after that, because we had complimented the Kalamai engineers, and because I had said, Jenevein, you've gone too far, it actually helped us get the deal. That was one of my first exposures to trying to figure out, how does this idea of face work? The guy on the front camel is another picture of me, believe it or not. The guy behind me, Joe, was Deng Xiaoping's advisor on jet engines and rockets. We're thinking about putting a GE jet engine on the ground at the western end of the Great Wall. This is right outside of Dunhuang in Gansu. And suddenly I'm supposed to go ride camels with Mr. Joe. And we're going to be rowed out to Buddhist temple or monastery. I didn't realize that I should not have been, as a younger, non-Chinese, I should not have been on the lead camel. And not only am I on the lead camel, it's the biggest camel. Worse than that. Well, I grew up in Texas, so I can sit a saddle pretty good. I can ride a horse, I can ride an elephant, I can ride a camel. I've ridden a bull before. So getting on the camel, my first time on a camel, was comfortable. And so, as the camel lurches up, I'm fine with that. Part of my mistake was looking back to see Mr. Joe was white knuckling the pommel. The pommel is the front of the saddle. White knuckling it, and he's clenching his teeth. He's obviously scared to death, which is fine, except that I saw it, which could have been okay, except that, you see the shadows? There were witnesses. How do we overcome that? I had no idea we had anything to overcome. So Mr. Joe that evening invites me to play snookers. What you don't see is that the wall that I'm facing is lined up with people that report to Joe. It seemed to me like there were 20. There may have only been a half a dozen, but they're all people that work for Mr. Joe. And he kicked my backside in snookers. And I wasn't trying to let him win. I was doing the best I could to beat him, but he just whipped me. So later, it worked. We actually got our joint venture done, and we were toasting. So Mr. Joe retired later, and he's still somewhat reachable. The guy in between became the head of CNPC. Here he's the head of Qinghai, a little company, I can't remember the name of it, Qinghai. He later becomes the co-head of SASAC, State-Owned Asset Supervision and Administration Commission. He's been disappeared. I can't reach him. Xi Jinping disappeared Mr. Jian. Jian was one of the smartest people in China I worked with. He was also one of the most deeply honest people I worked with. Something upset Xi Jinping, so I have not been able to reach him. Okay, so that's the Blade Company, or reminds me to talk about the Blade Company. So here we were in China, not just negotiating well with Chinese and the Communist Party, we actually jointly operated companies together, whether it was the Blade Company or the gas-fired power plant company. And that's something that frustrates me when I come to Washington, is people in DC and the government here don't appreciate that not only have we negotiated with the Communist Party, we've operated, undertaken joint operations with the Communist Party. But every time we pivoted in our business, we were burrowing deeper into the Communist Party, and we were also being elevated in importance to the Communist Party because we were making them money. We were giving them choices. Also, this could be another mistake, y'all can tell me. At lunch one day, after we'd gotten the Blade Company going, it used to be AVIC 1 and AVIC 2, and then AVIC 1 and 2 merged. Then AVIC wanted a bigger piece of the company that we had started. And they were just going to say, everybody's going to reduce their interest and we're going to have more. And I said to the AVIC representative, well, if you're going to buy more of the company at that rate, we want to buy our fair share of the company too. We own 25% of the company. So if you're going to increase your ownership without paying for it, we want to increase our ownership. That got me in trouble. The Communist Party did not like me saying that because we were showing that the Communist Party was just taking interest from people without regard to even the laws of the PRC at the time. So they expected me to tell the truth, to make observations like that, and that actually helped them run companies better. Years later, when the chairman of the board, who was a good Communist Party member, was retiring, I was the only Caucasian descent person on the board. Everybody else was Chinese descent. In front of everybody, he said, the best board member I've ever worked with, and he pointed at me. Now, I know that feels like a compliment, but I also know that he was using me to criticize some of the behavior of the people that hadn't agreed with him or hadn't done the work that he thought they should do over time. Today, with my professional time, is working to attenuate Communist Party in China capabilities. I want to attenuate their capability to export fear, to export injustice, to export oppression. The Communist Party is worst, is hardest, is fiercest on Chinese, on people that live in the People's Republic of China. Here we've sued the biggest defense contractor in China, the sole supplier of military aircraft, and the U.S. Air Force found us. This is how we got into Pointe Bello. U.S. Air Force called to our very first project, maybe it was our second, when we were going to generate electricity for a carbon black plant, a plant that made carbon black in Xinjiang. We said, we tried to find out who our counterparty was. And they told us it's the carbon black plant. I came back to Texas. We couldn't verify that information on our own. So I got a hold of the CIA. I asked the CIA, is this our counterparty? Is the carbon black plant really an entity? Are we really going to be able to work with them? And the CIA said, yeah. And so having an awful lot of confidence in our mythological CIA, I went halfway around the Northern Hemisphere again and negotiated a deal to sell electricity to a carbon black plant. And I found out, y'all will think it's obvious now, but in 1995, it wasn't obvious to me that there was a shadow partner, a shadow counterparty, the Communist Party. So when I came back to Texas, I called my contact up and I didn't say, you lied to me, but the tone of my voice did. The tone of my voice said, you didn't tell me the truth. At the end of that, this guy at the CIA said, well, what else do you know? That was a what else do you know question that happened in the late 90s. And then after we had sued AVIC, the biggest defense contractor in the world, the U.S. Air Force asked us, what else do you know? This was our first report on the One Belt, One Road. All kinds of other implications there that y'all probably know. This is another thing we did. This, people talk about the Panama Canal. This is the entrance to the Panama Canal. The picture on the left is before a company called Landbridge won a request for proposal to build a power plant at Isla Margarita, the Atlantic entrance to the Panama Canal. Well, can y'all see way up there, the little helicopter pad? So it's a CCCC helicopter pad. The same outfit that's building airstrips in the South China Sea, turning shoals into military bases. So we found that, tracked it, but that's part of what we're doing. The very first meeting of Landbridge at Isla Margarita, well, the guy that runs the company is the guy on the far right. Who's everybody else? So if you wonder about what's happening on the Panama Canal, you can understand why this administration might be worried about it. Wang Yi, actually, I can't remember her name. At the time, she was Panama's vice president and foreign minister, so they've got an extremely close cooperation going on there. Huawei set up the methodology to explain to Americans, especially American political leaders, how to make sense of Huawei. And Huawei, at the time that we did the report, was saying, we don't build back doors into any of our equipment. So we showed the U.S. government, the National Security Council, the laws that Huawei has to follow to be a company in good standing in China. So the laws say that if you build telecommunications equipment in China, you have to build a socket or reserve an interface in the equipment for the PLA to plug into. That report, we were told later, we weren't there, so I don't know, this is what I've heard, went to UK after Boris Johnson had decided it'd be okay to put Huawei in certain pieces of the UK telecommunications network. We understood that Secretary Pompeo took our report to the UK and changed the UK's position. In December, I was at a breakfast meeting talking about the book, and this came up. And Kay Bailey Hutchison was there. It was a small group. Kay Bailey had been a senior senator from Texas. She was later the U.S. ambassador to NATO. And she said, I took that report to NATO and we used it for great effect. So that's those are some of the things that we're doing now. Another quick example, this is a county in Texas called Valverde County, Texas. It's way, way south. What do you find in Valverde County, Texas? Jackrabbits, cactus, and rattlesnakes. Guanwa Americas bought 200 square miles of Texas ranch land near the Laughlin Air Force Base. CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, said that's okay. They were just looking at a map. They were just looking approximately. They're just looking in a planar view. I testified to the Texas legislature that 200 square miles was underneath Laughlin Air Force Base airspace. What do Americans do in that airspace? We practice refueling airplanes. Every plane that the United States sends into war needs refueling. Almost every single one. So if you're collecting intelligence underneath that airspace, you're gaining enormous advantages. The Texas legislature 10 weeks later passed a bill that said if you're a PRC company, a Russian company, an Iranian company, or a North Korean company, you cannot connect to the Texas grid. Quick background, there are essentially 3 grid networks in the US, East Coast, West Coast, and Texas. So the Texas grid is almost completely separate. So this actually makes a difference. Real quick on Jack Ma. Jack's resignation letter that I thought was brilliant. He talked about Ali Ren, Alibaba people. So his letter talks about what we should do for people, or what Baba wanted to do for people. It said, Ali Ren deserved a young leader. Ali Ren deserved a smooth, controlled transition of power control. Ali Ren deserved transparency in operations. Every one of his resignation letter points was a poke at the Communist Party. Later, when Jack Ma was going to take Ant Financial public, Chinese oversubscribed the potential offering to an amount roughly equal to what the PRC holds in its treasury in foreign currency. So here you've got somebody who touches Chinese lives and preferences thousands of times a second, every hour of every day. You think Alibaba knows Chinese people better than the Communist Party? I think Xi Jinping's afraid that they do. When he has that fear to begin with, when he has Jack Ma's resignation letter that says, here's some things you ought to be doing, and then he shows that he can resource his objective set, his mission set, with an amount roughly equivalent to China's foreign currency reserves, it scared the hell out of the Communist Party. Imagine what we could do if we start collaborating. You can get the book.
You talked a little bit about Panama in the presentation, and it really is huge in the news right now. Would you be able to talk a little bit more about what you saw researching the Panama Canal situation?
We go to the Chinese to do our research. And we've seen what the Communist Party is, why they're interested in the Panama Canal. And it is to be able to control or affect energy supply around the world. And it's to be able to control or deny or monitor U.S. military movement. It's a concern. They control the mouth on the Atlantic, they control the mouth on the Pacific, and they've got investments all along. They've done some good with it. They've spent, I can't remember how many $1 billion in improving locks. So they've actually made the canal more effective than it was before, more operationally useful than it was before. But still, it's a choke point. It's a choke point for the world. Energy and other products go through there. It's also a choke point for U.S. military operations. If they want to get material from the Pacific to the Atlantic, it often has to go through the Panama Canal.
If you were to, for example, talk to our current president, which very much thinks in a businessman mindset, would you tell him if he wanted to pressure the CCP, would you pressure on the face department, or would you go for the wallet?
I go for both. If Donald Trump is going to make a deal with Xi Jinping, he needs to go to Xi and say, I, Donald Trump, the President of the United States, need your help. Russia is about to implode, and I can help it implode quicker if I want. I can keep them from imploding longer if I want, but Russia's going to implode. And if that happens, Xi Jinping, I need your help. I need your help so bad that I'm going to help you with my real estate expertise, since you have a real estate problem, and I'm going to bring America's wallet. Xi Jinping has to have face, especially within the party, to make a deal. And he needs cash in a bad sort of way. It's going to require both.
Let's say you're like GM and your car manufacturing in China's floundering right now, and you can't compete on price. They seem to leapfrog you on technology. What's your advice to those remaining American business people on the sort of business operations and economic side of things?
There's a huge range in there because they're small companies. Our company is relatively small. We had private investors, so we didn't have public stockholders to report to. We also were of a scale that the Chinese market was attractive. We didn't have to have it. There's a different set of recommendations for the smaller company than for the bigger company. The bigger companies like GM need to be working on the political side, and they need to have a longer view if they're going to stay there. And what they're doing now needs to focus on making sure that when Xi Jinping leaves the scene, that there is somebody or a system or a structure that follows Xi Jinping that respects the rule of law. And when I talk about rule of law, that's really a capitalistic model. Capitalism is allocating resources globally according to systems of law. The old system was the imperialistic system. And imperialism allocates capital how? By occupation. If you want coal, you occupy the territories that have coal. If you want gold, you occupy the territories that have gold under an imperialistic system. Under a capitalistic system, if you want the gold, you pay more for it. So if one system or the other is dominant for allocating resources globally, certain systems are better operating in that environment. And the systems that are, we often call democracy, but rather than getting hung up with the title, because we could say, is this a democracy or that? We could all argue about it. But the communities, the countries that push authority and responsibility to individuals, to families, to frontiers, to companies, those systems unleash creative individuality. They respect self-expression, whether it's what you say, what you talk about, what you write about, or whether it's the ideas you come up with to start a new company. Democracies or countries that do that do a better job in a capitalistic system because the PRC is so command and control. It brings every decision it can make into the center, and that suppresses individual expression. So not only is it oppressive for individuals, not only is it hell on families in those systems, it reduces the economic capability of those systems, and they can't compete in a capitalistic system, so they have to revert to imperialism. So they have to go back in time, build big militaries, and do bad things to good people. But what companies should do, big companies like GM ought to be pressing that narrative because that's what's going to be good for their business in China in the long term. And if not, they need to get out.
Curious what your perspective is now about companies being involved in China, investing in China.
I think when Americans and Chinese work together, they create jobs for Chinese and for Americans. When they work together, Americans have to work fewer hours to buy their stuff, their blue jeans, their iPhones. So when we work together, everybody gets richer. The problem with that under Xi Jinping's Communist Party is that Xi Jinping directs more of those profits because the companies he's supporting are losing a lot of money. He's not getting it from profits. There's a ton of trade, so there's a ton of cash moving. But Xi Jinping is directing it to building military capabilities. He's directing it to destroying environmental ecosystems in the South China Sea and turning them into bases. He's directing MSS, Ministry of State Securities, and ADIC and others to steal what the DOJ says is $200 or $600 billion of U.S. intellectual property every year. Alexander, retired general, says it's the biggest transfer of wealth ever in history. It goes on and on how badly the Communist Party is acting. But they're doing it worse to people, most and worse and fiercest to people inside the PRC. We've got to break that some way. I see that Xi Jinping has reverted Chinese governance, where Mao said the legitimacy of the party comes from the barrel of a gun. Deng Xiaoping said, let's try something else. We're going to keep the guns. We're not going to let go of the guns, But let's try adding improving Chinese people's lives. Xi Jinping has turned the clock back in history and said, we're going to depend on the barrel of the gun. And that's bad for everybody.
How did you see the whole fallout of the TikTok debacle? How would you rate the U.S. understanding of the whole TikTok situation?
The U.S. government still doesn't understand TikTok. They don't understand what it can do. They don't understand what it's trying to do. There's a reason why TikTok is illegal in China. And the reason why it is not just the data gathering, it's the propaganda pushing. MSS, Ministry of State Security, understands the value of that tool. U.S. leadership still doesn't understand the value of the tool, and they think that a sale could change control, and that's silly. The Communist Party finds American notions of ownership conveying control is rather quaint. Instead, the Communist Party thinks control confers control. And so ownership, that's not going to matter. The best thing that we could do if we think TikTok's bad for Americans is we should impose a user fee on it. Now, everybody that uses TikTok has to pay $5 a month. We can't address it politically effectively yet, so that's something that politicians might like. We call them sin taxes when we tax alcohol and tobacco. You shouldn't buy tobacco, you shouldn't buy alcohol, but we're going to let you do it anyway. We're going to charge you more for it. Treat TikTok the same way. I hope it helps us all do a better job with the relationship that can change the world.